All right, so here we are nearly a month into the protests and uprising that started in Minneapolis that have spread throughout, dozens of cities across America. It's definitely shining a light on, institutional racism in the police departments, policing issues, uh, instances of police violence, and I think unlike a lot of times when this has popped up before, um, it's shining a light on the reactions of who it is who says, "Hey, don't be so quick to say, bad things about the police." And hey, it's just a few bad apples. And oh, hey, maybe there are a few bad cops, but it's getting fixed. Didn't you see all the cops kneeling last week with the protesters? They were out there kneeling with them. I mean, sure, like 4 hours later, they were in riot gear gassing the shit out of them, but I mean, you saw the performative theater, right? So obviously they understand and they're very sad and they're very regretful. So we've now reached the part of the play, because to the police, this is just a giant fucking show. We've reached the part of the play where they now have to sit down with city councils who are trying to determine whether or not they should be defunded, and if so, to what a degree. Minneapolis, because it was the first city with the uprising, and the first city where, cops had to do performative theater and take a knee with protesters, is also going to be the first city where those conversations are actually coming to a head. So I thought we'd take a look real quick at the history of the Minneapolis Police Department and the history and the in relationship to the actual people and the city of Minneapolis and their police. And then I'm going to show you what their current marketing effort looks like. I will warn you ahead of time. There's a lot of propaganda. And you are going to need like those fisherman rubber waders that you wear that look like overalls that are made out of rubber, so that you can successfully walk through the 5 foot deep pile of horse shit that they are trying to sell taxpayers who pay their salary and fund their benefit packages for life. So real quick, let me give you a brief overview of just where Minneapolis is so you can see where it is they're trying to go. All right. Since the 1960s, black residents have been demanding wide-ranging overhaul of law enforcement agency, including community policing, civilian oversight, improved training, and stronger accountability. Instead, policies enacted by GOP governors and lawmakers have exacerbated mistrust of the police. In 1999, former Minneapolis police captain and State House Republican led a successful effort to revoke a law requiring Minneapolis and St. Paul police officers to live in the cities in which they worked. Nearly 20 years later, about 22% of St. Paul officers called the capital city their home back in 2015. And as of this year, roughly 7% of Minneapolis police officers live in the city. Many commute from largely white suburbs outside of Minneapolis. This has apparently been an ongoing problem. So, fast forward. 2 police shootings created public pressure for reforms. In 2015, a Minneapolis police officer killed Jamar Clark, a 24-year-old African-American who worked for a local trucking firm. An officer claimed that Clark tried to, quote, take his weapon, and in the ensuing struggle, another officer shot Clark. Some witnesses said Clark was handcuffed at the time. Weeks of protests ensued. The Hennepin County attorney ruled the shooting justified and declined to press charges. Stunner. In 2016, Philando Castile informed the officer who pulled him over that he had a handgun, which he had license to carry, but the cop panicked and fired 7 shots at Castile. Castile's girlfriend was in the car with her 4-year-old daughter, broadcast his final moments on Facebook Live. Reynolds said that he was reaching for his wallet, not his gun. Police officer was also later acquitted of all charges. In 2016, Minneapolis Police Department issued a new policy that officers had a duty to intervene when they saw a colleague use excessive force. The department also rewrote its use of force policy to prioritize the, quote, sanctity of life and made changes in its hiring practices. Well, we see how that worked out. And this is part of the problem that we have here, is that every single time the police actually get caught doing something extremely violent, extremely racist, extremely horrible, extremely illegal, poo, it's not a big deal. And then the police make enough of an uproar, they go, okay, fine, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make some changes. There you go. Okay, we've heard you. We're going to make changes. People go, oh, we don't believe you. But we're really going to make changes this time. So once again, the Minneapolis Police Department is claiming they are going to make changes. They went out on an all-out media blitz this week ahead of the city council meetings that are going to take place, discussing their defunding. So the police union rolled out the full media blitz. They did an interview on Channel 5 ABC News in Minneapolis. They did an interview with KARE 11 in Minneapolis. They did an interview with WCCO CBS. And yes, they were even on the CBS National Morning Show. You will also notice same backgrounds, and I'll show you another interview. So basically what they did was they made themselves available for a media junket. They broke out the only black member of the police union's council, along with Bob Kroll, who's the head of the union, and two other union representatives, women, of course, because they come off as less aggressive, less violent, and less menacing, meant in this context to further market forth the idea that these police are real good, chummy people, and they're just there to help you. So I thought I would roll a couple of minutes of this interview so you can see just exactly what they're saying before I tell you what it is they are actually saying. So here you go. We're just gonna skip over the KTSP interview. We're gonna skip over the KARE interview. We're gonna skip over the WCCO interview. We're gonna go right to the national CBS This Morning interview. Chock full of good lies and propaganda.
Police unions, as you know, have a lot of influence in the way policing is done in this country. And critics say the Police Officers Federation of Minneapolis has resisted changes in the past. In an interview you'll see first right here on CBS This Morning, we spoke with the union's president. That's Minneapolis Police Lieutenant Bob Kroll is his name. We also talked to other leaders of the union. You're looking at Rich Walker Sr., Cheryl Schmidt, and Anna Hedberg. We asked Kroll why he told his members in a private letter earlier, quote, what is not being told is the violent criminal history of George Floyd. We also asked the union leaders if they see a larger problem with policing.
Oh, look, they're already on it. See, George Floyd had it coming. Look at his criminal history. George Floyd was just a thug or an animal. So can you really blame these officers? Yeah, there we go. Let's keep painting that picture, Bob. Let's see what the hell else Bob has to say.
Bob Kroll, do you think there is a systemic racism problem in the Minneapolis police force?
I do not. Racial issues certainly need to be addressed, and we are willing to work through that as we have done in year after year. Many years in the police department, we are all engaged. There are racial issues. Is it systemic racism? Not in my opinion.
A lot of people are throwing systemic racism in our police department. I can tell you as an African-American male, I personally do not believe this exists. Our city council is very diverse. We got a black attorney general. We have a black police chief. I am the first African-American ever elected to the Minneapolis Police Federation in 152 years. You know what I see? I see progress. We're progressing forward.
I think it's very...
Wow. They've had one black officer in the Police Union Leadership Council in 150 years, and that's progress. No. It's not tokenism. It's not marketing. It's not a random shot in the dark occurrence. No, it's progress. Yeah, one.
Very hard. The only people I hear saying there's no such thing as systemic racism in the police department are police. I don't know how you move forward unless there's some acknowledgement about what people believe.
We can definitely acknowledge that people think and perceive that there's systemic racism, because that is all that is being said about law enforcement today.
Right.
I mean, it's really difficult to come up with the answer to seeing something so horrific.
Do any of you think there need to be reforms in the police department?
Certainly, absolutely.
What would you change?
Yes, and
Bob Kroll thinks there should be changes in the police department. I wonder what those changes are. Tell me, Bob.
I want to be a part of that. I think we would be better served by listening to what the community wants to see changed and then work with them to implement that. I think the first thing that we need to do is sit down with community leaders and listen.
You brought up George Floyd.
So Bob's bringing nothing to the table but saying, you guys have meetings to complain about us, and I will make sure to be present. That's it. That's what Bob's doing. Now, Who wants to know what Bob's really up to? I already know because I did research. Hey, Bob! Bob! Let's talk, Bob. Tell me a little bit about Bob, okay, Bob? Bob is an American police officer and member of the Minneapolis Police Department. He's president of the Police Officers Federation of Minneapolis, the police union for the MPD. He's been a strong critic of reforms of the MPD. The guy who just said he wants to listen and enact reforms, it turns out is a strong critic of reforms. He supports President Donald Trump, including speaking at a Trump rally in Minneapolis in May 2020 following the killing of George Floyd after Minneapolis police knelt on his neck for almost 9 minutes and then killed him. Kroll characterized Floyd as a violent criminal and called the protests a terrorist movement. Hey, let's see where Bob gets the moral high ground to stand on by calling protesters terrorists. Okay, here you go. Kroll joined the police department in '89. He was on the SWAT team for 15 years, worked in public housing, domestic violence, promoted to sergeant. As head of the Federation, it's approximately 800 members. Kroll advocates for additional police officers and additional autonomy of the police, okay? He advocates for less reforms and less oversight, not more. Do you want me to replay the piece of tape from 30 seconds ago where Bob tells you that he's totally open to police reforms and believes that there need to be changes? Because apparently Bob does not actually believe there need to be changes. I wonder why. Let's see how Bob rolls. Over his career, Kroll has been involved in 3 police shootings. By 2015, Kroll had accumulated 20 internal affairs complaints, only 3 of which were disciplined, including one that led to his demotion. In '94, Kroll received a 5-day suspension for excessive use of force. That too was later overturned. In '95, a lawsuit against Kroll in federal court alleged he used racial slurs while beating, choking, and kicking a 15-year-old multiracial boy. Kroll oversaw a botched emergency response drug unit raid in 1996 where an officer was shot by friendly fire. During a no-knock raid on an elderly couple's residence in September 2002, Kroll was among several officers accused of using excessive force in a no-knock raid on an elderly couple's residence. That's Bob, excessive force on the elderly while they're sleeping. Woo! Bob, you're crushing it. A lawsuit regarding the incident was settled for $60,000. In March 2003, Kroll was involuntarily demoted for ethical violations. He had his rank reinstated 3 months later. City of Minneapolis attorney recommended settling a lawsuit for $15,000 stemming from Kroll kicking and beating a suspect found at an impound lot in February 2004. Are you starting to get the idea of what kind of cop Bob is? Because they're trotting Bob out on TV to tell everybody how he's totally open to change. And the Minneapolis police they're hearing you and they feel your pain and they understand what you're going through. Right, Bob? Tell me more about what you understand. Hey, while off duty in May 2004, Kroll and another officer assaulted several people at an art crawl in Minneapolis. After a man allegedly bumped up against their vehicle, Kroll and the other officer, dressed in plain clothes, punched him, throwing him on the sidewalk and hitting his head on the ground. Then they taunted bystanders and then punched the man's sister and kicked another person in the face. A complaint about the incident was sustained by a civilian review board, and Kroll was suspended for 20 days. 1 month later, during a department ethics class, Kroll said that then Congressman Keith Ellison, a Muslim, was a terrorist. He also used homophobic slur against a gay staffer to the mayor, resulting in his suspension. Bob Kroll has been suspended 6 times, and yet somehow he's the head of the Minneapolis Police Department Union and the one who's going to go into City Hall and listen to people's complaints. In 2007, Kroll was named multiple times in a racial discrimination lawsuit brought against the city of Minneapolis by 5 black officers. The lawsuit described Kroll as having, quote, a history of discriminatory attitude and conduct, saying he wore a motorcycle jacket that had a white power patch. The lawsuit also alleged that Kroll was racially discriminatory in overtime assignments following a bridge collapse. According to Deputy Chief Art Knight, Kroll subscribes to the broken windows theory of policing. Yeah, Rudy Giuliani used that in New York, and we know that totally wasn't racially inflammatory or biased. After the shooting of Jamar Clark in 2015, Kroll contradicted witness statements that Clark was handcuffed at the moment of the shooting, saying he was actively resisting arrest and tried to take the weapon of one of the officers. He referred to the Black Lives Matter movement as a terrorist organization. Kroll was also critical of responses of then Mayor Betsy Hodges and MPD chief Janine Harteau, who said Kroll's views were, quote, not consistent with 21st century policing. In 2016, after officers walked off a job at a Minnesota Lynx game over jerseys that said Black Lives Matter, Kroll said that he commended the 4 officers, saying that Lynx games had, quote, such a pathetic draw. By the way, that's the WNBA, which is majority black female athletes. An email from police chief to Kroll was leaked to the press in 2016. In the email, she orders Kroll to only wear his police uniform for MPD sanctioned purposes, including his capacity as a union representative. And yet they rolled Bob Kroll out to be the face of marketing for the department. And they did all these interviews, including the one here at CBS WCCO. And why is that important? Well, because if you go all the way down through his profile and you look at his personal life, you will see that Kroll grew up on the east side of St. Paul, Minnesota, the white side. His father was in a union. He is married to Liz Collin, a news anchor for Viacom CBS owned by CBS station WCCO-TV, which is widely thought of as a conflict of interests. Kroll's a member of City Heat, a police motorcycle club whose members have, quote, openly displayed white supremacist symbols, according to the Anti-Defamation League. During a bar fight when he was off duty, Kroll had part of his ear bitten off. Interesting points. So what's the takeaway here, ladies and gentlemen? The takeaway here is that Bob Kroll is going to tell you that there is no systemic racism in the Minneapolis Police Department, even though the Minneapolis Police Department has its very own motorcycle club that uses white nationalist patches as part of their branding. Bob Kroll is going to have you believe that there isn't an institutional racism problem in the Minneapolis Police Department, even though he's received more than 20 investigations for misconduct, has been suspended 6 times, and has had all of those suspensions ultimately revoked, has gotten 6 different commendations, has reached a high position, and is now currently serving as a union police chief. Bob Kroll might be a racist individual and might be a racist cop. Don't let that take away from the fact that the Minneapolis Police Department and police departments across America are firmly rooted, based in, and actively operate within a horrible, horrible, systemic racist problem.